Greetings and salutations. Welcome to a good old-fashioned screencast, boys and girls. Today I'm going to show you my Linux notes. These are little text files that I have collected over the years with commands and fixes, and some of this stuff is descriptions for videos that I have posted. I'm not exactly sure what's in here, to tell you the truth, so I'm going to warn you right up front, there may be such things as typos and misspellings. Some of this stuff might be wrong. There might be a curse word or two in here. Some of it might be politically incorrect. I have no idea. There's no script. I just turned on the screen recorder and here we go. This is my Linux Mint desktop. Do you like my little guy in the background here? This is to remind me that life is not a crisis and we should all stop and smell the flowers every now and again. I'm not exactly sure what that is. It might be a squirrel. It could be a prairie dog. At one point in time I think I knew, but I don't now. If anybody has any ideas, put them in the comments section. But this is Linux Mint. This is what I have been using for my daily driver for the last almost year. I loaded this in October. I had been using Ubuntu before that. And I loaded it to do a video where I reviewed Linux Mint. It was one of the last distribution reviews that I did on this channel, and I just never took it off because it ran so well and it's been so smooth that that's what I've just used. Kudos to Linux Mint. Linux Mint 20 is awesome. And this is the Cinnamon desktop, and I like it. And it's not that big of a memory hog either. I had somebody on the last video say Cinnamon is a hog. No, it's not. Compare it to GNOME and KDE, and it's about the same. Okay, so let's jump in here. We're going to go to Documents. This is Nemo, by the way. This is Linux Mint's lovely file manager. One of the best file managers in the Linux world. Absolutely. Nemo is the bomb. Better than Nautilus for sure. And we have Linux notes here. And let's make this a little bigger so it's easier for you guys and me to see. When you guys do screencasts on YouTube or post videos on Facebook or whatever you do, let me make a suggestion. Figure out how to manipulate the fonts and make them bigger for everybody so they can see them. Not everybody's looking on a big monitor or a 4K television. I watched a video not too long ago from a very well-known Linux YouTuber, and I was trying to follow along with what they were doing, and I couldn't see it, and I was watching it on a 4K TV. I even got up and walked right up to it, and because of the processing that YouTube does to video, it was really fuzzy. So you got to make your fonts big so everybody can see. Besides, you never know. Somebody might be sitting in a tent somewhere watching this on their little tablet or their phone. Be nice to them so they can see too. Alright, let's open up the first file here and see what we get. This will give you a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. It says, before you exit alsanixer, open a new terminal and do sudo su to get high privileges, and it reminds you that you might break the system, and then do alsactl store to save alsa settings. Now, what is this all about? Well, I had one of these little Asus EEPCs. I still do. I'm using it as a server because this thing is so underpowered that it can't run any desktop. But when I first started playing around with it, I was trying to install Ubuntu with the Mate desktop or the Mate desktop, whatever you call it. I don't care. I call it Mate because that's what Wimpy calls it, and he developed the distribution, so take it up with him if you don't like the pronunciation. Anyway, I have this little machine and I was trying to get it to work, and for whatever reason the sound would turn on just turned off. Everything would be muted, and so you had to go in and open up alsanixer, which is an application that lets you manipulate sound, and you had to do this stuff to it. I'll show you alsanixer. It's real easy. So that's alsanixer right there. And it's just a terminal-based way of getting to the sound settings in your computer. And I want out, so... Okay, I have to escape to exit. There you go. That's what it is. So now you get the idea. This is what this stuff is all about. So this is useful to anybody who's trying to install something on an Asus EEEE PC and the sound won't work. Now here's the notes for the beginner's guide to bash. That's the most popular video that I have on my channel. Beginner's guide to the bash terminal. I get so much crap for this. People go, bash isn't a terminal. I know that. The title here is to be searchable. It's not 100% accurate, so back off. Anyway, so here are the commands that we covered, ls, and it just kind of tells you what they do here. These are the different commands. Now on this part about getting help, you notice that I forgot to do the help command itself. Boy, I've got no end of guff from that in the comments. People go, well, what about help? Well, I just forgot to do it. Anyway, so you get the idea. It's just all the commands. If you would like to see this actual thing right here, you may go to the video itself, and this is in the description. All right, let's see what we got next. This is an interesting little bug fix. It came along with Ubuntu 18.04, where for whatever reason Brasero would not write to a CD, and I actually do create CDs on occasion, and so I need that software to work. And this is the bug fix that came along with 18.04. I don't know whether this is still a problem in Ubuntu or not. It probably has been fixed in 20.04. But I still run these commands at startup. I have a script that I run that goes through and does little settings like this for my hardware. And I still run these commands. So I'm not really sure. If anybody knows, put it in the comments and then I can delete this. But for right now, it's still something I'm hanging on to. Let's see here. Oh, this is a command that I had to add to the up script. I did a video about this a while back where somebody had contacted me and they had alerted me to the fact that when you use sudo apt auto remove in Ubuntu to get rid of old kernels, it doesn't take the configuration settings with it. So this is a command that will go and find any package that was previously installed on the computer that left configuration files behind, and then if you run this, it will purge them. So it gets rid of them completely. So I added it to the up script. And what's interesting about this is that it uses the awk programming language here, which is these days rather archaic, but occasionally in Linux, you'll see this in scripts. It'll go and ask awk to do something. And somebody who was really good at awk pointed out that awk could do all of this. And it didn't have to use grep and everything. And they sent me that command. I didn't add it, but that was interesting. That's pretty deep stuff right up front, right? I think this one is too. Let's look at this real quick. This is a command that I had to come up with for a script that I wrote called P2V. Letter P, number 2, V, which takes a picture and you take an audio file and you put it with the picture and it'll turn it into a video. That's very useful if you want to post things on Facebook or YouTube that are just audio related. So you could create a card, for instance, with like GIMP, or I use Impress with the LibreOffice suite, and you could create a card and then you can just create a video that's nothing more than that card with the audio behind it. So that's how you do it. And if you guys are scribbling this down, I had to modify it in my script. If you would like to do that, head over to EZEELINUX.com and then check out the script called P2V. You can go get it. I do not have a guarantee whether P2V is going to work for everybody. I was talking to one person who was having some problems with it. I don't know what the deal was. Finally got it to work, but it's kind of shaky. It uses FFmpeg, and you have to have that. Okay, so this is a note that was actually sent to me from my friend Jeremy O'Connell, who was explaining in simple language how to create a deb package. I did a video about this, so if you want to check this out, you can. It just goes through and it's got the steps on how to do that. So if you want to create an installer package for your own script, that would be how you would do it. So I do have a video up called Creating Deb Packages. Disabling the root account. Let's talk about this. So in Ubuntu, there is no root account, really. There's no password for root. You don't set a password for root. This is an extra step of security. The idea is if you cannot log in as root, then nobody can access the root account. So what you do is when you install Ubuntu, you are immediately granted super user privileges, and you use sudo or substitute user do, sudo or sudo to execute commands as root. But if you should, for whatever reason, turn the root account on, and all you do to do that is give it a password, then you can turn it off. You can delete the password with this command, sudo password, delete root, or you can lock the account, which will make it so that the password no longer functions. Either way, you have a locked root account that also works with user accounts on a machine. You want to lock somebody out, you lock it. And then there's an unlock command as well. ext4 commands. This is interesting. Let's see what this is. ext4, of course, is pretty much the default file system in Linux, especially Ubuntu and Debian and Linux Mint and all that other stuff. Uses ext4. It's my favorite file system of them all because it never crashes, just works. Never had a problem with ext4. XFS, and of course everybody's all about the new stuff, I know, but I'm not, because it's like very complicated to work with. ZFS and things like that. No, I like good old-fashioned simple ext4. Have fun in the comments with that one. Okay, so let's talk about this. A very useful command, believe it or not, is sync. You'll find this in a lot of my scripts that have to do with backups, and that is where you just tell the system to dump everything out of the cache and write it to whatever block storage device it should go to, the drive. Here's fsck. fsck is how you do a file system check to a device. The device cannot be mounted at the time, so you would unmount it, and then you would run that, and it was just that simple. If you would like to force an fsck at boot on any Linux machine, if you put this command, touch, and what you're doing is you're creating a flag file called force fsck. That will tell the system as it boots to, hey, stop for a minute here and do a full check on all these drives. That's how that works. And then in Lost and Found, you can just look to see if there's any files that end up in there, but usually that never happens. And if they do, you can't really do nothing with them. Lost and Found is just files that they're orphans that doesn't quite know what to do with it if there's a problem with the file system. Very rarely, if ever, happens, though. fstrim is for working with SSDs, solid-state drives. That essentially triggers the trim function, and that goes through the file system and lists everything as deleted that is, it lists all the space that's available as available. And then the drive itself has logic in it that can reorganize the data in such a way to make the wear on the drive more uniform. It's a bit complicated. I hope I said that correctly. If not, I'm sure somebody in the comments will correct me. Discard. That is the old way of doing it. You open up fstab, and on the mount point for the file system, you would put the discard option. We don't really do that anymore in Linux. We use fstrim, and for instance, Ubuntu has a systemd timer that runs that once a week. It used to be an anacron, but if you go looking for it in anacron now, it's not there. And if you don't know what anacron is, it's a system that uses cron, which is the timer in Linux, the basic timer, to run commands daily, weekly, or monthly. Anacron is very powerful. Well, it used to be in there that it would set it to run fstrim like once a week. And then they took it out of there and they put it as a timer in systemd. Systemd is the pretty much the standard boot option now for the what is it called exactly? I'm drawing a blank, but it's how the computer boots up. And systemd can do some very interesting things. Some people don't like systemd. Defrag for spinning drives only. There is a myth that goes around that says, well, you never have to defragment your drives in Linux. Well, yes, no. Most people who do ordinary things with like their desktop, and if they have spinning drives in it, no, you'll never need to defrag it because it's pretty good at keeping up with itself, ext4. But if you do some unusual things, like you have a drive that's more than 75% full and you have a whole bunch of really big video files that you're storing, defragmentation might be useful for you. This just tells you how to use it. So down here at the bottom is a very useful command. When you create an ext4 file system, it sets aside 5% of the blocks it creates for use by the root, the system itself, or the root user. Now what that is there for is to prevent a situation where you have a completely full file system. In order for Linux to boot, it needs a little bit of scratch space, and needs it for executing programs as well on the drive. And if there isn't any, then it'll freeze up and it won't boot. And that just makes sure that that doesn't happen. But if it's a storage drive like your home directory, if you have that in a separate file system, you don't need to set aside 5%. And if you've got a really big drive, 5% is an awful lot of space. So this is the way that you can reduce it. So let me interpret this command here. So tune2fs is the command, and then we're telling it about the reserve space here with the -m, and then if you put a 1 there, it will reserve 1%. If you put a 0, it'll be 0. If you want to reserve 10%, you can put 10 in there, and then you just put the device here. So whichever ext4 partition it would be, like, you know, dev sda1. That's how it works. Okay, probably spent too much time on that, but that's how this is going to go, boys and girls. Let's see what this is. Post-install configuration for Linux Mint 18.3. Set up update manager scheme to update everyone. Switch to local mirror. Refresh and install all updates. Reboot. Search for and install drivers for... This is just how to configure Linux Mint after you install it, basically. That's all this is. Firewall, Timeshift. Enable write caching with disk-utility. Configure startup applications. So, there you go. And look, there's that tune2fs back in there again. So you get the idea. You can pause that and read it if you want to. Let me go ahead and get out of that. EZEELINUX tweaks and tricks text. I'm curious what this might be. I'm sure this is from an old video. This is a collection of commands you can use on your system to boost performance. Clean up your file system or just have fun with. Be careful. A few are powerful enough to break something. If you aren't sure what you're doing, be sure to read the documentation using the manual command. Here we go. Let's see what commands we got here. I'm going to really just go through this real quick, gang. Get info about your system. That's top. The old top command. I haven't seen that in a long time. Let's take a look at top. That's top. I like htop better, which is an improved version of top. That's htop. A little bit more logical. Did a whole video about htop and spoke to the guy who wrote this particular piece of software. Very nice fellow. Okay, so free tells you how much memory you've got. If you put an H next to it, that gives you a humanly readable content. ls block shows you your storage devices. So let's go ahead and do that one. See? And this is Linux Mint, so there are no snaps. You actually only see the devices that are actually hooked to the computer. I kind of like that, to tell you the truth. You don't see the virtual file systems that snaps live in. All right, disk free will tell you how much space you have on your devices. Date gives you the date. Wow, isn't that crazy, man? Who'd have thunk it? Calendar gives you a calendar. Uptime tells you how many. Users tells you who's logs in. Who am I tells you who you are. This is a command that if you don't know about old Linux and the old days of Unix computing, you might think, why on earth would you have that? Well, on some systems, the prompt doesn't automatically tell you who you are. So you put in who am I, and then it tells you. You know, hey. Present working directory, PWD. This less is a file reader. Wait a minute. Oh, we went back up. I don't want to go back up. I want to go down. It's going down. Why did my arrow not work the way it was supposed to? Uptime, users, who am I? Present working directory, less. We got cat. How to do cat and use that to add texts. Sync is here as well. You get the idea. There's the sudo. See, a lot of this overlaps, and like I said, this put all this stuff in for different videos. So there's defragmentation and all that stuff. Let's get out of that and close that terminal. We don't need that now either. File permissions batch commands. Oh, I know what this is. This is actually quite interesting. So what you may not know about Linux is, we all know how important file permissions are, but there really isn't a good way to do a whole directory of files at once. And this is the workaround for that. So these commands use find to go and get the directory, all these different files in a directory. So you would replace this with whatever directory you want to have done, right? And then it finds all the ones that are directories, and then it executes the change mode command and puts them all at 755, for instance. See right there. So this essentially is a running function that you're running on a command. So there they are. That's a way you can do that. Be careful with that. Firefox commands. This is an article that I wrote years ago when I used to do a lot of blogging about different shortcuts that you can use in Firefox and what the keys do. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Okay, keep going. Let's see here. Fix for touchpad not working after waking from sleep. Okay, so let's see what this is. Open a terminal, run sudo nano etc default grub, look for this line, quiet splash. Okay, see, that would be the fix for that, but I honestly don't remember what that has to go on with. Alright, anything that's got forjoe.txt, I'm a little afraid to open. Let's see what this is. Using a laptop outside of your home, coffee shop, work, bar, airplane, temporary, disable your USB ports. More specifically, your USB storage. This is interesting. So you can turn off your USB? That's interesting. No idea where that came from. None. Git commands. This is just me struggling to learn how to use the Git utility. This allows me to interface with GitHub. Somebody has asked me to do a video about this, and I'm like, no. I actually, to this day, have to do this. I wonder if I just gave away some information that I shouldn't right there. No. Just info@easylinux.com. That's just the user email for my GitHub account. Besides, that's got two-factor authentication on now. You couldn't get in anyway, even if you knew my password. Nanny boo-boo. Yeah, I want to close it, please. Close without saving. I don't want to do anything. So, okay, there's my... Oh, okay. I know what that is. No, I'm not opening that. That will tell you too much. How to set up GNOME boxes. I just call it GNOME. I don't call it GNOME. I think people that do sound like they have some sort of problem. In the U.S., Australia, and England, when you say GNOME, it means a little garden fairy, right? So for years and years and years, we've been calling it the GNOME desktop. It even has the little GNOME foot. And then they come along and say, well, this is GNU, so we want to put the G in there, like GNU. Haha. Whatever. It's terrible marketing, by the way. You don't have a product that people call something and then you come along and change the name. It's just, there's no reason to do that. Or tell them that they're pronouncing it wrong. By the way, you've been saying this wrong for the last 30 years. No, that's not how it works. Okay, what am I looking at? For Ubuntu 18.04 installation command, sudo apt gnome boxes. Oh, I know what this is. This was all these modifications that you had to do to make this work. I don't think you have to do this anymore. Well, here's Ubuntu 19.10. Okay. I don't know how useful that is. By the way, Boxes is a program that runs virtual machines, and I was playing with that for a little while, and I don't particularly like it. It's a little too simplistic. Group commands. Let's look at that. All right. Group add, snarf. Name of the group would be snarf. If you want to add the user to a group called snarf, then you would add user Joe snarf. Sudo delete user snarf. That's how you take them out. And if I want to get rid of the group itself, it's sudo group delete snarf. Pretty simple and straightforward. Now, why anybody would want a group called snarf, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to open all of these how-tos, gang. Let's just see if we come across something. How to add a swap file to Ubuntu. How to create a swap file. Now, it's worth opening that to find out what's in it. All right, so how to create a swap file. First, you use dd to create a file. This command right here creates basically a file. It's block size in okay, let me see. Size in megabytes. Okay. So if you ran this dd command right here and you did the size like 1024, you would get a 1 gigabyte swap file, and then you defrag the swap file, and then the next thing that you want to do is change the permissions on the swap file so that only the root user can access it, because you don't want the swap file to be accessible by everybody, because that can be a security problem. And then finally, this is a command called make swap. And then you mount the swap file, put that in your fstab, and then you'll have extra swap space if you need it. These days, with computers that have as many gigabytes of memory as they have, we don't really need to worry much about swap, but you do need to have a little bit of a swap file. So these days, Ubuntu creates a swap file by default. Doesn't use an extra swap partition like it did in the past. Used to be that's the way you did it. You would create a little swap space on your hard drive, and you don't do that anymore. And now we create a little swap file, and that's it. It's hardly ever used. And this is creating a swap file once again. It's just a different way of doing it. Okay. How to create Debian packages. Well, we've already looked at that. How to dual boot Windows and Linux safely. Now, I just talked about how I don't encourage dual boots. This file was written back when everybody was using Windows 7. That's how far back that goes. So that's what that is. How to get started with Linux. I wonder what's in here. Now, this is obviously from a video that I did years ago, or an article that I wrote. How to install Linux Mint 18.3. There's a revision of some sort. How to install Linux Mint 19. How to install Ubuntu 18.04. Here's my favorite bash commands. Let's take a look at that. No, I'm not going to look through those install videos or things there. That means there's a video somewhere on here. You can go find it if you want to. Let's see. My favorite. Okay, we've already been through this. The cat. This is for obviously for a video I did way back a long time ago. So you get the idea there. Favorite terminal tools. There's probably going to be more of the same stuff. I did a lot of these videos that are the same. Working with text, cast, cat, less, mono, show, logging in, SSH, SFTP. That's if you're using SSH. Checking the network ping, ifconfig. You know, they're trying to deprecate ifconfig, and they want you to use the this one, the IP address. I always reinstall ipconfig. I like it much better the way it's laid out. I don't like the IP command that they're trying to get everybody to use. Let's see what else we got here. KDE runtime install for KDE Live. That's only useful to folks running the KDE Ubuntu KDE screen tearing fixed. Let's see what this is. So what you have to do is copy the following line complete into text window. Do nothing more than copy this line. Export. Okay. Don't even know if that works anymore or how old that is. So that's something about working with KDE from years ago. How to install KVM. Linux books links. Let's see what that is. Okay, this is two really of the best books ever written about Linux. I've got both of them. Is The Linux Command Line by William E. Schatz. And these are links where you can just download them, and you can. This is actually available online. You don't need to get it from me. That was just where I got the links there. Let's see. That's the Linux command line. This is the book. The whole book. So we don't really need to get into that. I have the printed book of that one as well. Linux distributions deconstructed. So what this is basically about here is just talking about the different, I don't know, what is this about? Hold on, let's see here. Go back up to the top. Linux distributions deconstructed. The Linux way. Use programs that do only one task, but do it well. To accomplish complex tasks, use several programs linked together. Okay. That was some ambitious project that I was working on. Let's take a look at Linux file systems basics. Why not, right? Okay. See what we have in here. Oh, this is interesting. A directory is a special kind of file that contains links to other files. A file is a self-contained piece of information available to the operating system and any number of individual programs and owned by the user who creates them. Who knows? That's a very cool little thing. Little ASCII art there showing how permissions work. I think I did that myself. I'm rather proud of it. Where this got published, I'm not really sure. Linux versus Windows. I wonder what that is. This is some sort of article that I wrote. Linux is yours. Windows is still there. Linux versus Windows, the fundamental differences. This is an article that I wrote to be posted somewhere years and years and years ago. You know, I don't write anymore anywhere, and the reason why is because people have come to a place now where they no longer read on the internet. So you take as little as 5 or 6 years ago, 10 years ago, you could write an article and you could blog it, or you could post it like on different web pages. Matt Hartley and I had a project called Freedom Penguin. Some of you may remember Freedom Penguin. And I wrote a lot of stuff for Freedom Penguin and got a lot of great comments and a lot of people reading around the world. But then it just sort of seemed to stop. It's like I don't know what happened exactly. I think people just got inundated with the little short videos, and it just kind of destroyed the internet, to tell you the truth, if for anybody who wanted to write. Let's see what this is. Installing Linux Mint 17.3. Oh, goody. Boot from live CD, DVD, or USB stick. Connect to internet. Launch installer. Right. Moving Firefox from Windows to Linux. This is how you do it. So what you do is you open up Linux and then you delete the Mozilla directory in your home directory. That's what that indicates right there as your home directory. And then you open Firefox and let it create a new profile. Open Mozilla Firefox default and delete the contents. And then you find the default in the Windows, Mozilla, and copy contents to Linux. This is something that I had to do when I migrated my mother from Windows to Linux many years ago. She was a Firefox user, and then I just put that in there. In a tree. Oh, okay, yes. What this is a way to run the MP3 gain setting program called MP3 gain and have it do a whole bunch of files that are in different directories. So you could like run this on your entire music collection. That's the whole point here. And I forgot that I had that. That's actually quite useful, because the other day I was thinking about doing something with that. Let's see. Netfix for LMDE3. So this was a problem with Linux Mint Debian Edition 3, where when it would boot up, it couldn't find Wi-Fi networks. It couldn't find certain cards, rather. Yeah. And that's the fix. You had to add that in there. The refresh.net script. What is that? Well, this was a problem that Ubuntu had quite some time ago, where it would, when it woke up from being asleep, it would lose the connection on a Wi-Fi network, and you had no way to get it back. It's like it would just not wake up. It would never work. So what this did was, kind of, sort of, for upstart, sudo service network manager restart, and then for systemd, Ubuntu system ctl restart network manager, and that would kind of kickstart it and make it work. And then you could create a script to do that, and then there's the script, and then you could just run that. That bug seems to be fixed now. That was years ago, so not terribly interesting information. I'm not even going to look at that Samba config. Simple SSH setup for Ubuntu and Linux Mint. That must have been a video that I did. And it's basically how to start up SSH and make that happen. So you get the idea. This is a PPA to fix printing issues. I'm not quite sure what that's about. I wanted to send you the commands I use to fix the Canon scanning. Okay. These commands are for those who have Canon printers and they're having problems with the drivers. And there we go. That's what that is. In case I ever came across that. Somebody shared that with me. Snap commands. This is just the basic commands to manipulate snap files in a terminal. You can find, install, list, change, refresh, and remove snap packages. This is new, and this is actually something that I probably will always have to add from now on. In a kernel, let's see, 1904 and up, the kernel now tries to turn off your sound card when it's not in use. So on some systems, what that will cause is pops and clicks. Like every time you go to start a video, you'll get a big pop before the video starts, and then the video will stop. And if you don't touch the computer, you'll hear a click when it turns the sound card off. And basically, this turns this crap off. So you put this into this file right here, modprobe d alsa base, and that turns that off. It makes it so it can't do it. And I actually add this command now to my install scripts. So I do this on pretty much every machine that I install it in, whether I know whether I need it or not. Because if not, the second time that you boot it up, you're going to start hearing those pops and clicks. Like on this machine that I'm recording this on, that definitely has to be done for sure. SSD care and feeding. This is from an old video that I did. Probably when I was doing the EZEELINUX show for a while. You know, for about 6 months I didn't post regular YouTube videos. I posted this thing called the EZEELINUX show. And I think this is actually from that period of time. It is tempting to use a utility like the dd command or clonezilla to transfer all data from an HDD to an SSD, but don't do it. You should back up your personal data and reinstall the OS to the new SSD. That is true because you want to make sure that the file system is aligned properly, and also you want to make sure that the system knows that it's an SSD, so it'll run fstrin and a couple of other things that have to happen. So, like, this is so you can alignment check right here and make sure they're okay. Proper alignment avoids excessive read, modify, write cycles. The trim command enables an operating system to notify the SFSD of pages that are no longer contain valid data. Remember I was talking about that earlier? Maybe this makes more sense. This prevents unnecessary overwrite operations, which can reduce SSD performance and increase wear. That certainly says it better than I was trying to explain before, didn't it? Let's see what else we got here. Oh, I did want to talk about this because, I don't know, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I did a video about this, and it's adjusting swappiness. And, like, here's the command right here. If you wanted to, all in one command, if you want to adjust swappiness, this command right here, sudo bash, and then it will echo that into etc sysctl.conf. And basically what this will do is reset your swappiness to 10. So what is swappiness? It is the way the Linux kernel balances using physical memory and virtual memory. See, what the kernel will do in a situation when it starts running out of physical memory is it will take some of those memory pages that it has in physical memory and put them on the hard drive in virtual memory. That's your swap space or swap file. Now, the number 10 roughly, kinda, sorta, but not really, don't hold me to this, means that when you have 10% of physical memory that is available, in other words, you get to that magic point, it'll start swapping. The standard setting for Ubuntu and Debian and all of the children thereof is 60. So technically speaking, if you get 40% of the memory full on the computer, it starts swapping, kind of, sort of, not really, don't hold me to that. So if you change that number, you can kind of get the kernel to use the CPU to use the memory more than, fill up the memory and then only use virtual memory as a last resort. And technically that's supposed to make your system run faster. It can make a very small gain in performance on older systems. Let's say if you had a computer that only had 4 gigabytes in it. That might be something you'd want to do. However, I stopped pushing that so much because a lot of engineers came after me and they said that setting it to 10 actually makes the system more unstable. And the reason why they use 60 is that it represents a good balance for desktops and servers and blah, 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 blah. So I got to the point where I said, okay, I'm not going to mess with this. Just leave it alone. Now, write caching. The gnome-disk-utility, known as disks If you open this, you have the ability to go in and set the write cache. And what you're actually doing is taking control of it. By default, when you install your Linux system, it's using the write cache. And all that is that you're saying you're giving the kernel permission to cache things that will be written to disk later. This makes the system run faster. If the write cache is turned off, your system is going to stop every time it needs to write to the disk and do it before it does anything else. And you're going to get a performance hit because of that. Things will be very jerky. So when you open up the disks utility and you actually turn on the write cache, you're just taking control of it. That gives you the ability to turn it back off. That's the way I understand it. I could be wrong. This is an area that is very difficult to research and get any information about. That's the one thing about GNOME utilities that bugs me. There's very little documentation, and it's sometimes very hard to figure out what settings actually do, but I put it in there anyway. And I usually end up setting it anyway. Ubuntu install tutorial. Let's see what Ubuntu Mate 1910 fixes are. Add this command to start up applications. Okay, these are the settings that you have to use with the Mate desktop if you're not running any sort of compositor like compiz or mutter or whatever. If you're not running a compositor, then you have to do this to turn that on, or you get screen tearing, which is where you're like playing a video and there's a big line in the middle of the screen where half the image is over here and it's over there. And that drives me insane, so I have to turn it off. And here's the pop and click thing once again. How to get rid of that. Terminal commands for VirtualBox. This might be interesting to some folks. These are commands that you can use to modify virtual machines that you have set up. So like we've got vbox manage, modify the VM, name of VM, and then you can set the RAM to 256. So you can have 256, is it gigs or megs? I can't remember. I'm not, oh, it's video RAM. Yeah, it's 256 megabytes of video RAM. That's what that is. To get VBox to render properly in GNOME or Unity. That tells you how old this is. Add this link to the environment. Override GTK. It has to do with GTK versus Qt. See, all of this stuff here. This is how you can shrink a virtual machine. So as you use a virtual machine, if it's a dynamically allocated drive, then it grows and grows and grows. And this way it'll go through and you first delete all of the free space on the drive, and then you shrink it down. So I haven't used VirtualBox in a very long time. I have it installed on my other machine, but with all of the crap that went on with the CPUs, everything got so slow in virtual machines that I stopped using them. Okay, and I'm not sure, that happened a couple of years ago. If you'll recall, folks, they had the problems with the CPUs where they had found all of those vulnerabilities and they had to do all those patches, and they turned off a lot of the look ahead in the CPU, and that just really affected the performance of virtual machines incredibly. Let's see what this is. Good Lord, I have no idea what this is. None whatsoever. Okay. Webcam embed. Okay, this is so you can embed a webcam. That is an old command. Okay, we got two more files here to look at. Let's look at this one. This is when I was fooling around with the XFCE desktop. So once again, you have no compositor, right? So then you have to turn on the compositor. This is actually the better solution than installing Compton in the XFCE. So you turn off the XFCE compositing in Windows Manager. That's software, so it doesn't affect screen tearing. And then you put Compton in, and this is the configuration file that you put in there. And yeah, that's when I was goofing around with that, and we don't really need to look at that anymore. And finally, something about ZFS files. Talking about Z-pools and data sets, ZFS lists, ZSys snapshots. How to do all that crap. That's when I was fooling around with ZFS a year or two ago. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I think we looked at most of the files there. Quite frankly, I'm a little shocked. I thought there was more than that. I hope this video was somehow useful to you in some way or another. Probably not really. But people wanted to see, and I was curious too. I hadn't gone back through this stuff. So yeah, and there's probably more outside of this directory. I know there's stuff that I have in just the documents about different things as well, but those tend to be more in-depth tutorials. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching. What else is there to say? Linux notes. As you go through your Linux journey and you come across things that you need to fix, if you're experimenting with stuff, always keep your notes. There's all kinds of good information in here. Another thing that I will add to that before I wrap up is keep everything you write. So you definitely want to keep your scripts. These are your scripts that you write for sure. So let's just look in here real quick. You can see I have a whole buttload of scripts in here. Let's get that list as well. I got a whole bunch of scripts in here. Just stuff that I've written, you know. Like, here's Linux Mint 20 install script. Let's see what's in there. I want to open that with a... I want to display it, please. Thank you. It's executable. That's why it's coming up this way. So here's my script that I use when I install Linux Mint 20. And these are all these are the software that I go and grab. And let's see. And then I have local packages of things that... things are in debpkgs I want installed. And I don't like Firefox, so I purge it out of the system and I install Google Chrome right there. And then there's where we add the pop click fix. And it seems that I may have found out that I didn't need... Well, I guess I didn't need the disk writer fix for Brasero anyway, because it's not here. So I might have gotten the answer to that earlier on. So I don't put that in there anymore. You get the idea, gang. Now, a lot of this stuff is available if you go to EZEELINUX.com and look at the bash scripts page, and you scroll way down, there's a bash scripts collection 2020. In there is a lot of like install scripts and things like that that you can look at. Well, here's one that's not marked as being, well, yes it is. It says it is. Display. Well, that's not... this is to... yeah, what this does is it grabs the Thunderbird, all of the configuration files, and it will move it over to another machine. That's what that does. USB reset. That resets the USB. That's... I don't think the permissions are set properly on this. Let's fix that real quick. See, if you want to set executables, go to permissions and allow it to be executed as a program. Well, it's on. Why is that not coming up the way it should? There's something funky going on with that. Is it up here? Aha! There's the problem. The shebang was wrong. How to do that? I have no idea. Let's see, Control S to save. Let's see if that fixes the problem. F5 to reload, right? I have no idea why that's doing that. Why do I get a different icon there? Oh, that's why. It's a typo. Do you see that? Bet you guys saw that before I did. I've been running this program. How have I been? How's this running? This is wild. Okay, control save. It's there. See now. Okay. That was strange. I'm sure you all found that just rivetingly interesting as well. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the video now. We'll go back to our little guy sniffing the flower, and I'll say once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy this sort of hangout video, because boy, they're really easy to do since there's no editing. Talk to you guys again soon.